All right, so welcome everyone. I am really excited about today and continuing our conversation. So today we're talking about waking up to sacred activism and the connection between anti-racism, the environment, and you, each one of us. And we are going to have a slightly different format than our last conversation because we do want to spend some time interviewing Regine, and then we'll also open it up to really check in with everyone and just see like what ways have your thinking changed in the past month and what actions have you taken. And so I'd love to hear, I recognize a lot of faces. So who was here last month when we did the kind of anti-racism, Black Lives Matter conversation? All right, is anyone new? Because I see someone on the phone, I can't quite see who they are. If you are new and you want to type in the chat, I'd love to hear if anyone's just joining us. And so I'm going to give maybe a quickie intro to Regine. And Regine was so gracious about joining us last month, and we really took that ownership around as white women and our Mark, our man. It is, our job to educate ourselves, and I'm just so grateful to Regine for her willingness to also bring a Black perspective to our group and help us wake up. And I just love Regine. She is a client, and I consider her like we're opening up to our friendship. And she owns Black Butterflies Journeys, which is this amazing, it's like a transformational coaching / retreat business for Black women. And I've gotten to just meet her and know her over the years. So thank you again for coming on and joining us.
Thank you so much for having me for this great opportunity. Last conversation was really transformational, I would say. And so I'm really looking forward to today as well. Thanks so much.
Yeah. And so I wanted to open the conversation because I've had a few people in the last month just ask me, why am I, as a white woman who's running a spiritual-based business, hosting these kinds of conversations? And that question took me aback for a minute. And I realized in listening to some other white anti-racist educators that when you hear someone's story, it sometimes helps you make some connections you may not have seen. And so I'm going to just spend a quick introduction with myself, and then we'll move into interviewing Regine. And so I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I had parents who thought that they were doing like the right thing by educating us to be colorblind. And so they had a very liberal perspective. And when I was born, they had asked some family members to be my godparents. And for a variety of reasons, they could not be. And so they turned to the people that they thought that they would most want to raise me if anything ever happened to them. And it turned out to be my godfather, Mr. Thornton, and my godmother, Mrs. Thornton, and they are Black. And so I really grew up having that kind of close, intimate relationship with someone who was Black. And when I was in high school, I sat at the table in the lunchroom where, we had someone who was Black and Asian and East Indian, and we were the kind of mixed international crowd. And after college, when I graduated, I joined Teach for America, and I was sent to Los Angeles. And while I was teaching, first I had a bilingual classroom of all Latino students, and then I taught in Watts, where my classroom was primarily Black students with some Latinos. And I realized that I had the luxury of leaving Watts or Compton every night and going back to the beach. And I thought that wasn't fair. So I actually moved to Watts, and I lived there for a couple of years. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is because when my godfather died a few years ago, I had just finished writing his memoir. And I had learned so much about him and things that just from a child's perspective, I didn't realize he had experienced, and I had never really heard his story. And he had said to me at the end of his life that he was so tired, and that he was just tired of having to put on that mask, and he was just tired of being that example, because he was the first Black banker of a white institution. So he was very well known in our community. And even when he said that to me, it did not register that he was also referring to our relationship, meaning him and mine, and that he still had to put on that mask, and he still showed up in a very certain way in our relationship. And so I've just had that aha of, even though I have had what I would consider meaningful experiences and close relationships with people of color in my life, that I still see through a white lens. And it's just been in the last month or so of really waking up to that on a deeper level of understanding the part that I've played in this, and the fact that even when you're in an intimate relationship, whether it's a friendship or, godparents or um, romantic partner, that I still have freedoms that the person of color or the Black person does not. And so I've been really making it my mission to educate myself and speak up. And I want Regine and I to really delve into this connection between the Black Lives Matter movement and just people waking up around racism and all the other kind of movements and issues that are going on in the world today. And Regine really shared an aha with me that was eye-opening. And so before we do that, I just want to kind of again establish the framework for this conversation, that we are creating a safe, supportive space, and that we are taking ownership around any levels of discomfort we have on having these kind of anti-racist conversations. And we're coming to it with that place of vulnerability and listening and not being judgmental. We're just going to be respectful and treat everyone on the call the way we wish to be treated. So I would love for everyone to give me a little thumbs up or type in the chat box that this is like the safe context of this conversation. Okay, great. And so in that vein of continuing like a lifetime of work around educating on, white privilege and how I might personally come to this conversation, then today we want to explore that idea of sacred activism. And this is a topic that Andrew Harvey, I think he coined that phrase, and just making that connection to spirituality and activism, because I know for many years for myself that I would, and other white people would, tend to shy away from like other tough issues in the world because it would make me emotionally uncomfortable. And so seeing that that is part of the white lens of privilege has really been an aha for me. And to look at how can we come to activism from that place of there's compassion in action, there's like deep spiritual knowledge, there's courage, there's love, there's passion, and then there's also wise radical action in the world. And so I want to open it up with Regine around, our world is facing really just so many issues, whether it's Black Lives Matter or the environmental crisis or women's rights and indigenous rights and LGBTQ rights. And so you had made a comment to me offline around the connection between white privilege and Black Lives Matter and the environment. So I'd love for you to, let's like unpack that and untangle that here.
Sure. So Megan and I talked prior to the first call, kind of getting ready, and I don't remember what the context was, but I was sharing with her that, this whole notion, and this may step on some toes a little bit,
yeah,
but, really the white Anglo-Saxon, the white men in particular, has industrialized, come into this world. And if you think kind of globally and historically, he has come and pretty much destroyed, raped, pillaged, colonized. It seems, and I don't know, I was talking to a girlfriend about this the other day, and we were like, what is it? It's like, it's not that they don't have souls. I don't get it. But what about this whole notion that, that there's this drive to dominate, right? Just think about think about the global landscape, right? And what's happening with our planet and what happens with indigenous cultures, not just in the United States, but throughout the world, right? It's like they don't matter. What's happening with the biodiversity of the planet and down to the algae, it doesn't matter if it doesn't serve my purposes for domination, expansion, and you know, revolutionizing the world, then I'm going to run over and destroy every and anything. And I don't have the answer. I don't know what it is, but you know, and so when you look at issues like save the whales and you know, child slavery, it's predominantly men, and for the most part, white men that are perpetuating these acts against people and the planet, right? And so what I was sharing with Megan is that, you know, it seems to me that there's this superiority or this feeling like the world, the planet is mine and I can do with it as I please. Like that's kind of what's underlying this idea that I can, you know, I can go into a community and level everything so I can build a factory, right? Like I have the right to do this. And so I feel like if we address that, I don't know how to do that, but if we address these underlying issues, then you solve how it's, because it's symptomatic. Racism is a symptom of this white privilege, right? Planetary destruction is a symptom of the same dis-ease, the same thinking. And so, you know, I would love to hear from you whether you think, I think she's going too far here, that's not true, you know, or what, because I don't know. I can't wrap my brain around what this underlying desire is, or need or impulse. And then I also don't understand why the world has sat back and allowed this to happen generation after generation after generation to our detriment, right? Because you know, globally we know what's happening with this planet.
Right. So what I hear you saying is that the actual thinking and the belief system that's coming from that white lens of it's okay to you know, use up all the resources on the earth, or it's okay to enslave people, or it's okay to, you know, take all the fish out of the ocean, or it's okay to, like, whatever that kind of mentality is, that it's shared among that kind of dominant white culture, that there's a superiority idea of, you know, I'm not gonna consider needs other than my own on that really big scale. Yeah, so I'd love to open it up. Is there anyone who wants to comment either in the chat or we can also unmute you if it's a little easier to respond that way, just kind of what you're thinking and feeling based on this conversation. So yes, we are doing a recording of this. Eve said she and her family were just having this conversation last week. So
Hi.
Hi.
Can I talk a little bit? Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Eve. I'm in San Francisco, and I have the privilege of having an amazing sister-in-law who happens to hail from an island called Mauritius, which is in the Indian Ocean. Mauritius Island is an African nation, but it's way out in the water, about 640 kilometers from Madagascar, off the Cape of Africa. So I met her about 26-ish years ago, and she's my sidekick. She's a ton of fun. She's hilarious and a great lady. She's bilingual. She speaks French, and she was educated there on the island of Mauritius, which was completely unpopulated until those entitled white guys decided that they were going to sail around and bring slaves there. And so they brought indentured workers who were African, Indian, and Asian. And so now it's a multiracial island, very peaceful, celebrates all the holidays of all the major religions, and it's a beautiful place, except for the fact that it is based on a history of colonialism and racism. So we were having this conversation. Every Saturday we get together as a family and do a dinner because we're sheltering in together, and she was talking about being flabbergasted, like she couldn't understand how this had actually happened. How had she grown up? She's a very beautiful woman, as you can see. And when I first met her, she told me that she wasn't beautiful because she was black like a charcoal. Mm. And I was like, what? And I'm looking at this gorgeous woman, and she's telling me she doesn't feel good about herself because she's just grown up with all this endemic racism. And she was on the call a couple weeks ago when we met. And it was really powerful for her. We went through like 2 weeks of like major tumult and just talking through all these things that had happened to her. And so here we are, fast forward to last Saturday. We're here at my house, and we had a conversation about colonialism, basically the white male privilege that says it's okay to travel the world and kick the shit out of everybody because, hey, we can. It's a cool thing. So I feel like what you said is exactly right on, Regine, exactly right on. Like, what is up with that? And it's across the board. It's, are you a gay person? Are you a black person? Are you a woman? Are you an environmentalist who's getting the shit kicked out of them because you believe that people shouldn't just take what they want? I completely agree with you.
So what do you think it is? What is the source of this?
I kind of feel like it's a handed down, like a generational, just the way when there's trauma in your families, that gets handed down generation to generation. There's a way where these white dudes are getting this handed down. And the weird thing is, like, if you see families where there's girl children and guy children, the girl children don't get that handed down to them, even though it's the same family of origin. So I'm a little bit at a loss as to why they think they own it, but they do. And I honestly don't think they're doing a great job. They're messing it up.
I mean, I also want to just take ownership, because I don't think we can only point to white guys, because I even see, places in myself where, I've purchased things without considering the impact on the environment, or even things subtly, like, on Facebook, I've been sharing my little baby birds out my door, and I put an air conditioner in underneath of it. And it took me a minute to go, oh, wait a minute, like mama bird isn't going to come back to the nest if there's that kind of noise. And so I ended up moving it, right? But I'm like, there's just so many things that I think is part of a belief system, even more than any one, person or race or gender, that we've all adopted, that we're all having this conversation around of like, how am I participating in this? Because the truth is, I can't change other people's point of view. And I may not know what that's like, where that started from or why that's happening.
Right.
Other than, I think what we've named, like there is that sense of entitlement. Emily brought that word to the conversation. I think that idea of like, I am entitled to something, or I have domination over something. And yeah, I'm really curious to take it into that space of like, how are each of us like untangling that belief system inside of ourselves? And then how are we choosing what issue to focus on? Because if we can undo the underlying, like it's almost like the code that we're operating with is faulty. And if we can undo some of that code, then we can choose, okay, can I apply that to the environment? Or if I'm passionate about women's rights, like I can apply it to that. Or if I'm passionate about Black Lives Matter, I can apply it to that.
One of the things that I'm thinking of as you're talking about male entitlement is female unentitlement. Because when you talk about what can I do, I have to believe in myself and take the power in order to be a useful part of the conversation and construct some positive change. So it's not so much about blaming that it is the way it is, like you just said, Megan. It's about finding our voices, I think, as people who care, as women, really.
Yeah.
I've been talking to all my girlfriends lately, and I think that's a common theme, is this trying to find their voices, believe in themselves, have that kind of empowerment, not entitlement, different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to. How many people feel like that's a theme for you? Like speaking, learning to speak up and learning to like put yourself first, or at least consider yourself inside the conversation. Yeah. Yeah. And I noticed that. I'm going to share another little story. So Regine and I had a conversation too about putting Black Lives Matter signs in our yards. And I was again struck with I'm going to unpin your video. Eve. So I was again struck with the differences in like my white privilege. I was thinking about putting the sign up on our road, and I live in a very mixed, like red-blue state, very mixed community with political views. And I wondered whether the sign would stay there, or like kind of what the neighbors would think. And Regine said her concern was if she put, and if you want to speak for that yourself, please do, but if she put her sign in the yard, that she wanted to install security cameras because she lives in a predominantly white neighborhood, and she just wanted to make sure that she and her partner were safe, and also that there weren't repercussions around, where now people, calling them out for like something ridiculous, like you're not cutting your grass up to like HOA standards. And I was impressed that the sign stayed up on the road. No one took it down. And then yesterday, my neighbor asked me, did I put the sign up there? And I said, yes. And she said, well, you put it on the side of the road that people consider our driveway. And I'm uncomfortable in this time having that sign where people think it's our driveway because it's too inflammatory. And I watch myself, this is going on text, and she's a lovely woman, and when I would consider her like a neighborly friend, and she has different political views from me, obviously. And I watch myself, like, how much do I speak up for this, and how much do I respect her view and not make an issue to it? So I said to her, I am involved in anti-racism education, and it's important to me to have that sign up there, and I'll move it onto like the side of the road that's clearly our property, like I'm not taking it down. And I just saw like how subtle it is, right? Like just one little conversation of like, what does that mean to speak up? And like, how much do I try to educate her or change her point of view, or just say, I hear you and I respect you and I disagree with you, right? And so I'm just curious, like how many of you on the call have had situations now this month where you did engage in some kind of conversation with someone who had a different political belief or a different belief than you do, and you had to like find that courage inside of yourself to speak up or to say something that maybe you wouldn't have in the past after this conversation. So I'm curious if anyone wants to chime in on that.
Hi, I'll chime in, but also I wanted just to loop back around to Regine's original question about where does this white superiority, come from? But if we look back in history, we had plenty of matrilineal societies where women took care of the land. And the land, which is the goddess, was revered and respected. So all we have to do is look back at a time when women were, quote unquote, not in charge, but there was a unilateral understanding that neither one nor the other was more superior in the sexes, although women were definitely revered because they could give life.
Mm-hmm.
So with the onset of Christianity and the founding fathers, they started to, get rid of female sacred feminine, and that's when the onslaught of women were just not revered anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They were too sexual. They were forbidden to drum and dance and celebrate all this, the rites of passage and the moon phases, because it was seen as going against God. So that's where it comes from. So
Yeah,
in my
there's
work,
this whole like intertwining of all that.
yeah, this is what we have to remember. I mean, we used to use our menstrual blood to fertilize the land.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
And then back to your question, Megan, about speaking up. Yeah, I took a 21-day anti-racism challenge with a guy called Mikhail Brooks, and I got called out as a racist by a racist on my Instagram feed. I was like, okay. This will be interesting. So my first reaction was like to remove her comment, because I was scared. I didn't want to be called out and I didn't know if I'd answer it properly. So I stepped back and left it on there for a day. I mean, it's still there. But yeah, she was turning the conversation around because it was about Black Lives Matter. It was the whole conversation. I can't believe we're still having to explain ourselves. But she was saying, you're not propelling the idea of unity if you take away, if you say Black Lives Matter more than white. So, and then she said, that's racist. And I said, well, why is that racist? And she said, that's why. So, and then of course it went into a Trump thing. So after that, the conversation just collapsed. But I stood up for myself. I was proud of myself. And
You're home early. No, that's okay.
Is my mission to carry on with this. And I'm from England, so I didn't know any of this history of America. So I've been spending my time understanding the history of America. Of course, England has its own history,
Sure.
but I had no idea. So it's been a real education for me. And then I've been talking to my husband about it too, who had no idea either. So plenty of deep conversations, which are obviously are continuing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing forward the kind of female goddess point of view and also sharing about speaking up. So before we continue, anyone else want to chime in on any of the topics we've discussed so far? Okay. So let me unpin this video. So Regine, I would love to kind of shift topics a little bit and just like unpack that dynamic that happens, because this was another eye-opener for me this month, was just like when a white woman realizes that she's participated in racist thinking or some kind of racist action and she starts crying or apologizing to someone who's Black. So I'd love for you to just articulate, like, what position does that put you in as a Black woman when there's that kind of aha on a white woman's side and now like the tears are coming?
Yeah, so it's so funny, I don't know whether you all have been privy to this whole Karen thing, this Karen phenomenon of the white women's tears and all of that. So, we talk about it all the time with my community, and it's so confusing because it almost feels a little disingenuous, even though it may appear, or from that woman's perspective, it's very genuine.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, the positioning,
Mm-hmm.
hierarchy, right? Like you are empowered to do whatever you want. What are you crying about? And then, because I'm a human being, because I have feelings, then I'm put in the position of, okay, let me try to take care of you, and I feel bad for you, and so what I feel or what I think doesn't matter. And psychologically and historically, the Black person, going back to slavery, it was our job to make white people comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's it's like a trigger, because if a white person's not comfortable, then the next step could be, I'm in danger.
Mhm.
So all of this is kind of happening subconscious, and if you're not really aware of it, you can be triggered in so many different ways. Whether feeling like, let me put my stuff aside because I don't want to challenge this person, or I don't want to call this person out, or I genuinely feel bad for this person, or you know this is some BS crap. What are you complaining about? What are you
Mhm.
crying about? So it's a really and it can vacillate in one instance. Um, but for sure, white women's tears have been used as a weapon against Black people, and so we are very leery, very uncomfortable
Mhm.
when someone starts to, because that could mean that my husband, brother, cousin dies. Or we saw it right with Christian Cooper and Susan Cooper, or with Susan, whatever her name was, in Central Park. Like, I mean,
Right.
that was like the clear example of how these tears have been used against us.
Mhm.
Um, and so whether it's because you feel bad, or in her case, she was clearly being manipulative,
Mhm.
the the impact is similar.
Yeah. So it creates that dynamic of now the white woman is the victim, right? If she's the
Right.
one crying. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what Regine's referring to, is there's a video where a Black man, his name's Christian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was in Central Park in an area that was clearly marked. You were not allowed to have pets off leash. And this white woman came in and he kindly asked her to please put her dog on the leash. I think he was bird watching. And she refused. And she actually picked up the telephone and he filmed it. And she called the police and she's saying, this Black man's attacking me. And he clearly was not. He was just very calmly saying, could you please obey the rules? And that really opened a lot of people's eyes to how white women could use tears as a way to call in help and reinforcements even when they weren't being threatened, let alone
Yeah.
right. So I am curious because I think we had a few people in our community who did have that kind of response, and my perception of it was it wasn't coming from a manipulative place. It was coming very much from that genuine, oh my God, I didn't realize what I was doing. So do you just have any recommendations that if a white woman is experiencing that genuine tears because it's an aha and they genuinely feel bad, but the Black person is in front of them, how do you navigate that? Because for me in my work, there is something that is so true when tears come in that way, and at the same time you've really educated me on that, what that dynamic creates and why that might not be appropriate in certain situations if you're with other Black people.
Yeah, it's tough because some Black people will say save it, like, even if they know it's genuine. That's just how hurtful
Mm-hmm.
it's been, right?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily take that approach if I know that the person's being genuine, but I do still feel that if you can contain yourself, that would be the best, and just
Mm-hmm.
wait until you go home, because again, now you're putting me in a position of taking care of you
Mm-hmm.
and not feeling comfortable to share how I feel, because of course I don't want to see you crying and all of that stuff. So I would say, find a way to suck it in.
Uh-huh. I kind of
And wait.
bookmark the experience. So I see Judy's
Yeah.
raising her hand, so let's also here. Let's see, we need you to unmute yourself.
Yeah. What you just taught me in that conversation was white people talking to each other, and only women that I've seen so far, cry about how horrible enslavement was, and they draw on that and they get so upset. And so you just taught me that if I see that happening, the follow-up question would be, if you feel that so deeply, can you help us change it? you know, instead of going into the poor pitiful thing. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
So yeah. And then when you think about the other thing is in terms of, you know, the power of the white woman, you know, the reality is white women arguably put Trump into power, right? It's like, you know, I mentioned this at the last call. Yeah, you know, I was just sharing about, you know, white men, but again, white women are the mothers. You know, you're raising the people that sit on these boards, the police officers, the politicians, the board of directors, the corporate leaders. So these are your sons, your nephews, your cousins, your brothers, your husbands. What's happening, you know, because I have some sister friends who feel like really all this is because of white women, not white men. So what's happened, and I understand that certainly white women have been subjugated as well, but you're not as disempowered as I you know, again, sorry for for stepping on toes, as you know, sometimes you purport to be, because history shows that you wield so much influence over your men, and so I don't know, yeah.
And you know, you know, for me, Regine, because I really looked at that, you made that comment, and I'm like, okay, how am I doing this in my own home, right? And I looked at, I'm like, oh, that dynamic between my husband and I, where it was so unconscious on my part of like not speaking up or not putting myself first. And it took years for us to untangle that, and we're still doing that. And now I look at my son, and even things that are so subtle, like when we sit at the dinner table, my husband and son both love to bike, and they are often recapping their bike ride of the day, or, you know, really passionate about this topic. And I watched, and I'm like, oh, my daughter and I are actually not contributing to this conversation because that's not our thing. And I'm not speaking up to say, hey, like, we don't get to always talk about your thing. Like, just because she's 6 and the little one in the family, and what she has to say may not be as like cool or interesting as everyone else. Like, we need to have a more inclusive conversation. And so I know there's just been so many layers for me to untangle on that personal level to even get to the place of, oh, there's actually more equity in my marriage, or there's more equity in my family. And without first bringing that forward of like me valuing feminine qualities, me valuing my own voice, me valuing putting myself first, I'm like, how can I do that in my family? And then how can I do that in the world? And so it does feel like it's this very like multi-layered, like each one of us has to take that first, make that change inside of us before we can even go out in the world and make any kind of difference.
Yeah, so maybe what is happening in the households is that your white sons, right, are watching you be devalued, and then they're just perpetuating this with their wives and when they go to work, and so the cycle continues. Yeah.
And like I wasn't thinking like, oh, my son is somehow devaluing us, but that's the message that I think is subtly getting implanted of like, your voice isn't important, or what you want to talk about isn't important. And you know, for me, sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't need to have a chatty conversation. But I realized as like a leader in my family that I had to be the one to speak up and say, you know what, we're going to direct this conversation in a different way, or to point out to my husband, when you two are dominating the conversation in this subtle way, that it's not inclusive of the women at the table. So we need to make that kind of change.
Yeah, that's good.
So any other comments before Rose? Let's see. Let's go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Rose.
So I just wanted to, you know, real quickly, it's interesting because at our last call, as we all know, you know, I was definitely emotional and had an emotional reaction. And then when, you know, all of that conversation came up in our Facebook group, I really had to step back and go, whoa, like, you know, because as I said to you, Regine, my intention never was. And I really had to go through something with it. And I think it was good for me in the sense that it got me the opportunity to go in and be with some other stories I had going, which I needed to clear within myself. I have mixed feelings about some of this. You know, I'm not, you know, again, as we said, we're being forthright and honest here with each other. I'm a crier. You know, it's in this moment in time.
She is.
I am. Those that know me know I am. Thank you. You know, now what was interesting, and I can honestly say for myself, was the next day, no, 2 days after this whole incident happened on Facebook, I saw a very good friend of mine who I have not seen in, you know, 2 or 3 months since this whole COVID thing. She's a Black woman. Her name is Andrea. And we saw each other at Costco. We were walking around, and she was walking around, and I look over and she's there, and I'm like, Andrea, and she's like, Rosemary. And of course we did the whole, you know, like, you know, take the mask, no, don't take the, you know, did that whole funny thing. Anyway, we just talked for a couple of minutes and stuff. And I said to her, I said, how are you? And she's like, you know, it's not easy. She says, but, you know, we're walking it through and we're doing what we need to do. And I started to cry. And again, it's who I am, right? Like the tears, there's no controlling my emotions at this point in my life as far as my physical tears coming out of my eyeballs, right? I can't shut those off. And she immediately went, oh, honey. And I went, Andrea, don't do that. Don't do that. I said, this is not yours. This is my emotion right now, and I don't want you to own that. I said, you've got so much going on right now. And I never would have had that kind of a response in the past, right? Yeah. I would not have even thought that. That thought would never even, I would have gone, oh yeah. And there we would have been, the two of us, blubbering. And it's like, so from that standpoint, I am eternally grateful for what happened in our group. Am I never going to cry? No, you know, it's me. It's, you know, I joke with Diamira, a good friend of, you know, the group, that I have a spirit guide that cries. And anytime she wants to communicate with me, she gets me crying. Because it really is something that's so just, I don't know, something transforms, something happens with it. But I just wanted to share that because I just really, it really was important for me to go, oh, wow, like what it gave me was not turn off your tears, there's something wrong with you. It gave me a different way to be with those tears, to not put it on someone else, to own my tears and be me. And I think that piece, yeah, so.
Yeah, I love that. I love too, like just holding the space that there's more than one solution to any of these different issues, and that if we can name and articulate some of even what's happening, to even, you know, be in a conversation to say, if I am crying and I can't control it, then to recognize that what that impact is, and maybe even say that to the Black person in front of us or the person of color in front of us. Yeah, that's really powerful.
Yeah, so I think that makes all the difference, right, Rosemary? It's like, you know, taking the ownership and not, because naturally, you know, we're human, and so we have these natural responses to things. And so to give the person permission to say, you know, this doesn't mean I need you to take care of me. This is just how I express myself.
Mm-hmm.
Especially on a planet that, especially on a planet that emotions are normally meant. You know, when someone normally cries on this planet, it means, oh, there's something wrong with them. They are crying, right? They are the victim. They are, you know. Right, and it's like, exactly. Because I translate tears in such a different way, because of my 4 Agreements background and my life coaching background, I think it has been an empowering thing for me to go, oh, wow, like there's these pieces here. And although tears to me mean one thing, there's a whole other side of it. Once again, things I had not realized, right? Things I was not.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it I think also speaks to the idea that, you know, we are interrelated. This is what this whole COVID thing is teaching us, right? So what I do impacts you, what you do impacts me. And so for me to forget or neglect that,
Yeah,
that's the issue, right?
yeah.
It's understanding the interdependence.
Yes. And one real quick last thing, Megan, while I have the mic, and then I'm going to stop talking pretty much for the call, is I wanted to share a real quick thing on my Black Lives Matter sign.
Oh yes. So yeah, tell the story. This is a beautiful opportunity.
So it's just, yeah. So of course, when we got off the call on our last call, Mark and I had a great conversation about doing a Black Lives Matter sign. And of course, Mark was like, what exactly does that look like to you? Like, I don't want to do a giant neon sign, you know, woohoo. It just wasn't something that was okay with him because for understanding background, we live in a full-on red neighborhood. I mean, it is just, no, they're Trump supporters. So anyway, so we discussed, had an agreement as to what our sign was going to look like. And what we did was I did a Black Lives Matter sign that I painted, and it hangs at the entrance of our driveway directly underneath our house number. So it's almost like 124 Black Lives Matter, that kind of a thing, right? You can't not see it. It's very obvious. And it's very pretty. Satisfied everything, right? And Mark was like, why do you want to do this? And I said, I just feel like it's something I want to stand for. And Mark asked me these kinds of questions so that I'm clear as to where I'm standing. Anyway, so we had this great conversation. We made this agreement. He helped me with the sign. He did the cutting and we put the sign up. And one of the reasons I said to him, I said, you never know who's driving by. And I know where we live on a private road. There's no reason for somebody to come by unless you live here or you're visiting someone. But I'm like, you never know. Drivers, delivery, who knows? About 2 weeks ago, our FedEx driver, who is our regular FedEx driver, and God knows we all live on mail order right now, FedEx, UPS, mail, pulls up, and Mark goes out to meet him, because we always go out and meet our drivers just to kind of just say hi and to help them. Oh my God, they're overworked, And he gets out of the van, and Mark and him are standing there joking around. Mark's like, well, it's not a mattress this time. He's like, no, man, at least it's not that. They're talking or whatever. He's a black guy. And he says, by the way, when he turns around, looks at my husband, he goes, I just want to say, love the sign. Thank you. I wasn't there. He comes in. He goes, I've got to tell you what just happened. Regine, I was jumping around like a crazy woman. Oh yeah, no, crying isn't even the word for that one, right? I mean, I was like downpour. But I was so happy. I'm like, that's why I put up my Black Lives Matter sign, for that. Because I want people to know that is where my support is. That is where my heart is. That's what I'm doing. So I just wanted to share that because it was such an empowering thing to go, yeah, that's why I have that sign up there. I don't want to hide anymore. And it was just so nice to know that this gentleman saw this and was like, hey, thanks, man. Thanks for the support. So it was just a really beautiful exchange. I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Megan,
Myra.
can I jump in before we get too far from just what she just recently had said?
Yeah.
I had an experience, and it's back to the crying thing.
Mm-hmm.
Rose and I are sisters. I cry a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a realization though, and I was glad what you said, Regine, a little bit earlier, because it tied back into it. I realized that when I have those tears come up for me, I had a realization that what it is the emotion around forgiving myself for not having seen, the ideas or the thoughts or where I was holding, the Black culture, whatever that is in that moment. There were conversations, I'm not going to get into all that, but I realized what it was, and it wasn't about, I think what the Black person would typically feel, like you were saying earlier, is that it's coming from I am so sorry. And I'm so sorry is not okay right now for the Black person, because it doesn't do or undo or anything. It's about, and it ties back in, for me, it tied back into something you said the first call we had. You said something to the effect of, it's not our responsibility to get you to do something and to understand. So it was like, it just all tied in, and I saw in that moment, like these tears are my tears of forgiving myself for that. It has nothing to do with that person that's standing in front of me. And so, like, even for the Black culture to get that and be able to get that, in the sense of feel that in that moment, that this isn't being projected on them, this isn't anything about them. And, you know, obviously, like you said, you know, you don't need to fix it, you know. So anyway, I felt that was something I wanted to convey.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. I get it. Yeah.
Okay, I did one big giant fib. I have one more little piece because I mentioned this to Megan earlier. Okay, and I mentioned this to Megan the other day, and I wanted to share it real quick. And actually, this is technically Marisa, who just spoke's son. Her son started a Facebook group based on a painting that he saw. He saw a painting, and it was a painting of this person does all their paintings looking like astronauts. So it's an astronaut standing on a road, and in front of him on this road is a stop sign, like a traditional stop sign for the corner of a block. But underneath the word stop, it says racism. So it said stop racism. Her son got so inspired by this that he ordered 1,000 racism stickers, just the word racism, and started going around and putting them on stop signs, and started putting it out there. He now has a private Facebook group of, I think,
and they're all over the US.
All over the United States.
He's probably bought and distributed about 6,000 stickers. He's paid for it. He has not, he's not making money off of it. So he created this new Facebook page. People reach out, and in order to create a safe space, there's a way, because I'm helping him with it now, so that it's not just somebody coming in and trolling and, you know, doing all that. But yeah, so we've probably have gone through about 6,000 stickers so far. And then people will post them on a stop sign, and then they take a picture and they put it on this page. And so there's this community. And like, if my son sees that there's an issue in a certain area, he'll say, anybody out there that can go out, you know, in this area, in wherever, Montana, and support them, you know. Wow. So yeah.
Mari, I'd love for you to post on the Fully Shining Women page of like how people can contact, is it Jason or Justin?
Jason.
Jason.
Yeah.
If you like, how they could get some of those stickers if you want to do that in your own community, and just be, you know, part of the reason why they're kind of monitoring who's coming into the group. Like, it is illegal to put these signs on stop signs.
It is.
You know, essentially you're defacing government property. So it is part of that radical act. Yeah. Okay. So what I would love to do is just take a little bit extra time. We're kind of getting towards the end of the hour and a half. And Regine, are you okay if we go a little over? Yeah, because I'd love to just really check in with everyone. And, you know, one of the things I've been really aware of for myself is that I shared with Regine what some of the things I had done since the conversation. And I said to Regine, like, I don't want the pat on the head. Like, this isn't about that. It's about me keeping accountable to myself about what I said that I'm going to do. And my daughter-in-law sent me this meme that I want to just share. And it says, anti-racism work is not self-improvement work for white people. It doesn't end when white people feel better about what they've done. It ends when Black people are staying alive and they have their liberation. And it's by Rachel Cargo. And so I just want to put that framework around us sharing what it is we're doing. And I do want that accountability in our community of how has your thinking changed? How have you done something that you made a commitment to do on the last call, and something's happened or changed since then. So I just want to open it up for anyone who does want to share, and I know some of you already have shared, which I really appreciate it. So if you want to report in the chat box of like, here's the things I said I did, and here's what I've done, or if you want to verbally talk about it, I'd love to unmute Moon. And so you have to unmute yourself on your end too. There we go.
Hi, Megan.
Hi, Moon.
Regine. Thanks so much for having me, you guys. I just wanted to share that there's a really cool project called Grassroots Law by Sean King that I just started volunteering for, and they're really helping, social justice happen, but on the front lines of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm starting a queer death cafe for allies and for queers like myself, talking about the intersectionality of how we can help people in our community, because I work as a death midwife.
Okay.
And also I'd really like to know more about getting some stickers, because we really need them. I live in Southern California. There's a Trump table, like a guy sitting at the end of at the end of our community with like a table and all this propaganda. And my wife is like, don't yell at the window, but I'm always like, racist, or it's not helpful, but
yeah,
it does make me laugh.
Moon, are you in the Fully Shining Women Facebook group?
No, I'm not, but I would love to join.
Yeah,
because Lena
I would
got
love
me
to have
involved.
Yeah, please come in that group, and Mari will post how to go ahead and get those stickers.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Really
you're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
And I love what you brought up about doing the larger work. And so one of the pieces of this is that last time Regine had mentioned, if you want to make donations, that Campaign Zero and Color of Change, they're nonprofits that are working towards that kind of systemic policy change around racial injustice. For me, that was like one of the things I did, kind of like in honor of Regine's time, because she said, she's not doing this to get paid, that I could just say thank you to her. So I'm glad you're mentioning some other groups that are also working in that direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. After our last group, I did the same thing. I love Color of Change already, but it was good to learn about a couple different places to go.
Yeah. And if anyone didn't see on the replay page, Regine and I, well, it was mostly Regine, but we posted a lot of resources. So if you didn't see that, they're underneath the actual video of the last call. She had suggested all these different places and ways that we could continue to make a difference, whether it was around books or spiritually, emotionally, socially, in your business, financially, politically. There's all sorts of different suggestions there. So if you are looking for more, they're there. So anyone else want to just share what's changed for you in the last month and what committed actions you've taken? Okay, I see Judy raising her hand. I'm not hearing you.
Oh, I thought you were looking for somebody else that was also raising their hand. The thing that has happened for me is there's a woman locally that offers workshops and seminars on how to be an ally. So I'll be taking my second class in that this week tonight. So that was something that I greatly appreciated, because I thought, how do I move out of this emotion reaction into taking action?
Mm-hmm.
So what she's doing is fabulous. And I know she's just local, but I don't know if other people have taken that on.
So tell me a little bit more. Like she's a Black woman doing anti-racist education, or I'm not sure the context of what you're referring to.
Yeah, she's a Black woman, and she has her own consulting business. I can't remember its name, but she put together and is teaching different levels of how white people can become an ally.
Got it.
So she has the first one, and then I think she has 3 different courses on it. But it's a blessing in my life, because I thought, well, what action do I take? And so from after that, I put a question out on our community newsletter next door. And I said, did anybody want to read white fragility with me and just leave it that simple. And so we now have 2 book groups of white women that are reading that together. And it's not about read it to discuss the book. It's read it to share what it lights up for you or your reactions to it. So it's going well.
Beautiful. You know, it's so like uplifting to me to hear what each one of you are doing, because I said to Regine, I'm like, oh, there's less people on the call this time. And at the same time, there's a bunch of people who want to watch the replay, but it really is this like one by one, like what are we doing to change ourselves? And then how can we make that impact on that, you know, one UPS driver, FedEx driver, how can we have that one conversation and inspire someone else in our community to come into a book club? Or how can I have the conversation with my neighbor? And right, that's how we're going to keep moving this conversation forward. So anyone else want to talk? Helen?
Yeah, I've been supporting Black women in business, sharing their Instagram page and Instagram pages, because part of my white blinkers, for me personally, because I work in transformational retreats. I've been actually liking a lot of your stuff on Instagram, Regine, by the way. I'm Transformational Goddess Retreat. That's me.
Oh, love
anyway,
it.
But I didn't realize, but I wasn't honoring the Black goddess in my line of work, because I have only seen pictures and images of, you know, white goddesses that look like me. So a big aha for me has been, oh my goodness, I've forgotten about the Black goddess. So I immediately wrote to my list, my email list, and said, you know, this is going on. I am here to support Black Lives Matter. And, you know, from now on, you're going to see a lot more Black images. And I used to own a spa, and I had a Black assistant, and she used to do my social media. And I remember it so clearly. She was using images of Black women getting massages. And I said, oh my goodness. And it just suddenly twigged in me, like, I said, thank you, Malika. Thank you for doing that. She's like, huh? I said, I didn't even think about pulling Black images, because, you know, and then when you go on free photo sites to use for your website and social media, right, there isn't as much.
For sure.
There aren't as much images of Black women liberated, you know, all the, you know, benefits they're going to get from working with us. I search high and low, so I really make sure that I've got a cross-cultural images when I'm doing my stuff. So that's been a big aha for me. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. I've never ever predict that like this conversation could go into like the Black goddess realm. So that's so cool.
Well, she's there on one of my drums right there behind. So I always make sure she's on my on my Zoom calls now. She's right there.
I love it. Thank you, Helen.
That's great. That's great.
Anyone else want to chime in? Any other questions? I know Regine is open to taking questions, or anything, Regine, you want to. Hey, hi, Lena. Lena's in the background because her Wi-Fi is not really letting her do the video part. Regine, anything you want to share? Just ahas or changes in your own life?
Yeah. So I think for me personally, this has really been an interesting journey in terms of, you know, the opportunity to have these conversations. So I'm actually going to be having a conversation with Melanie and her community.
Melanie Scott?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's great to be able to, from a very personal level, to be able to have conversations that I've never had or thought I would ever have in my entire life with white women. So thank you for the opportunity and for the platform. And so I definitely feel more empowered. I think for a lot of Black people, these protests have given us strength. It's like they've blown life into us, because we were so discouraged and just resigned to the way things were.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel, more inspired to continue to not give up. And, I'm an attorney. So I'm always doing kind of like social justice work, and that's kind of the background I came from. And so, elections and getting involved, and I've always, done poll watching and all those kind of things. So I'll continue to do that, but just really the sense of hope and optimism for the first time in a long time. So it's been a shift for me. I think without these conversations and just watching the news, and although I see like companies and organizations and dismantling, disfunding police, a lot has the destruction of monuments, like these are huge changes. But still, and yet a lot of this is just what's the word? I don't want to say surface, but what's the word? Like it's just, oh my God, what's the word that means not necessarily real, tangible, but tokens? I'm happy that statues are, but is this going to change the wealth gap?
Mm-hmm.
And the mortality rates and the things that the prison rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what really matters to me. So, but I know that when minds change and hearts change,
Mm-hmm.
then there will be real change.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm just appreciating. I'm like, okay, well, even if we made a difference in your life, like that is meaningful to me. Yeah. And so I would love to like kind of wrap up our conversation today, because I know like you're a student of I don't like the Black movement. Like you've studied Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all the great figures. And
Yeah.
so I am curious, like we've talked about how it, up to this point, and maybe still during this point, that like talking didn't work, nonviolent protests didn't work, violent protests hasn't necessarily like changed those kind of deeper markers you're talking about, like health statistics and prison incarceration rates and economic factors. And so like what do you see is like that best tactic? Is it having these conversations one-on-one? Is it a combination of I know you don't have the answer, but is it the systemic policy change? Like I just would love to hear like where do you think that we could put our energy to make the biggest difference?
Yeah, I think so it's probably several areas, but political, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in your cities, there are probably more Black people running for office now than there were 4 years ago or 6 years ago. And so, as we go to the ballot in August and November, seek out, who these people are and support them financially and support them with your vote and share that information. Because the more people we have in office who are making these laws that impact, police unions and impact policies and so forth, then that helps. Certainly funding and hiring Black people so that they are not just the lowest rank in any organization, because as we can build wealth in our communities, particularly for women, right? If you support a woman, you support a community. So that will also translate into economic wealth, because that's one of the biggest disparities between Black people and white people in this country. And so funding and supporting Black businesses is so important. When you think about Black Wall Street, and we talked a little bit about that in the first conversation, how at every chance Black people started to raise themselves up and become financially viable, there was always this insidious and intentional, destructive force that took that away. And so to enable Black people to take care of themselves, take care of their families, and then continue to build wealth so that can be passed on to generation, that's huge. So wealth, politics, I think those are the two major ways. I mean, that alone will make huge differences. And then of course the personal work, right? The personal transformational work where you are owning your stuff, where you are having hard conversations with members of your family, where you are telling your sons and your brothers that they are not the center of the universe anymore, and raising these boys, and so that they're not, I don't know what to call these people, so that thinking starts to become eroded. That's huge, because that's, you guys, you white women have so much power and influence over boys. And if you could raise the next generation of white men to be more compassionate and considerate, I think that will change not just what's happening with Black Lives Matter here, but will change what's happening with the planet, right? And so if we can do those three things, then we are on our way.
Yeah. And to know it's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. I was talking to my husband, and we talked about how, like, this is probably 100-year project or a 500-year project, right? This isn't just like this month or this year project. So in that vein, I would love to just have everyone, because I realized I hadn't really done this for myself, to just check in, like, what are you committing to in, the next weeks or months for yourself personally, in terms of taking those next steps. And I'm like, like, I kind of checked off a lot of the things that I committed to. So I want to really like feel into like that next part for me. And I would like everyone, I'm making that invitation for everyone to do that as well. So whether you want to put that as a statement here in the chat box, or when I post the replay in the Fully Shining Women Leading Our World group, if you want to share that link, you're welcome to do that. And I'm going to type in mine too. Hear lots of typing fingers. I've been sitting too, Regine, with just, I don't tend to post things on social media around voting, or like that real politics, like who you're voting for. Just get it. I mean, I think I've said things in past elections a lot, like, please vote. But I've been really sitting with that too, of just, okay, I feel like this is such a huge election and we need every single person out there voting. So I think I may break through that and just be like, you know what, it's time to bring that up in social media circles, even though you do get that blowback, because we need like everyone. Yeah. Judy is saying our local Black Lives Matter group is taking a PSA to list local Black-owned businesses in local newspapers. That's awesome. Very cool. So it feels like people are still typing, so I'm going to give everyone another minute or two before we end our call to kind of close that loop around taking some actions. Anything else you want to kind of say, Regine, while people are
Feel complete. I don't think, let's see, I'm just reading what people are saying. Yeah, I feel complete. I don't think I have anything else that I'd like
Yeah.
to share.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like awesome conversation again. All right. So Ritza Anna is saying to be open and vulnerable with myself so that as I do my internal work, then my outer world and my dream reflects the healing around racism and reflects my heart's desire and knowing that we are all one. That's beautiful, love. Judy saying, having worked through my reaction, it's my time to take action. I love that. What a great quote. Eve, I'm going to host a conversation with my diverse group of knitting girls. I want to come, Eve. Guatemalan, African, Thai, African American, American Caucasian. I want to know their experience. I realized that growing up and living in San Francisco, I forget how much power I have as a white woman. I realized that in spades when you went to, how do you say Meritus? You got to say it for me again.
Mauritius.
Mauritius. Mauritius. Okay.
Mauritius, like Maurice.
Mauritius.
Yeah.
All right, Emily, I'm going to show up fully with compassion and conversation about Black Lives Matter with my white friends, continue to educate myself. I'm asking for my company's management for transparency on how they're hiring new teachers. Love that. That's like systemic change. Mary Ann is looking up race sources you shared here today, examining where I have had and continued to have privilege that others may not. Rose, finishing reading my grandmother's hands and going to my next book, conversations with family and friends, voting for sure, following more Black figures that have a voice I need to hear. I found 3 new ones yesterday on Instagram, and that has been really powerful. Love that. Someone who's an iPhone, I'm not sure if that's still Lena, continue to listen and support Black businesses. Thank my sons for stepping up. Respect those that maybe I don't agree with. Look for the sameness, stay in the light. Beautiful. And Moon is saying, read more, listen more, donate more, elevate Black voices and art, vote. Yeah, I love that. All right. So I just want to first of all thank Regine. I just feel like you are such a leader and you're such a fully shining woman, and you do that in so many different ways, both with your own community and here in this community, and it does really touch my heart. And I just have this like deep sense in my heart of like all the energy and love that you're putting out is like going to come back to you in spades. And I just want you to know that anytime you want to ask me or this community for support or spreading the word or whatever we can do to support you, please do. And we will also do our part to find our own ways to do that. And then I also just want to thank everyone on this call, because it really means a lot to me that we're showing up in this way and we're having conversations that aren't always comfortable. And that's part, I really felt that this month of like, oh, if I can share part of that burden of discomfort, then if we could spread it more widely, it doesn't have to rest so much on our Black community. And I just love that we are mixing together the spiritual and the practical and the leadership all in this really new and more inclusive way. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will keep these conversations going and keep doing our work in the world. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much.
Oh,
thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if you want to thank Regine, go make a donation. I'm going to get off the call and do mine. So, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
You love you, ladies.
Love you.
Love
Bye,
you.
beautiful ones.
Nobody wants to leave. Love you.
Eve.